All right, here we go. Josh McDaniels, what has he been up to the past year? That's what we want to know. Well, this is what he said. This is from the Patriots. They tweeted over the weekend, there's just an evolution to our game that I think is important, that you need to respect. This year has given me an opportunity to really consider all aspects of what this job entails. I'm excited about what we're going to build here and the evolution of our offensive scheme, our offensive attitude, the things we do, how we practice, and ultimately the way we go about playing. He used evolution a bunch of times there, S. Mizzle, and I love to hear it because that's exactly what I want to see from this offense. Evolution, because you got nowhere to go but up, because my God, they were rock bottom last year. So thank God he's coming in with evolution in mind. I mean, I need him to be Charles S. Darwin for this offense, S. Mizzle.
Yeah, and so before the Patriots released that video of Josh McDaniels, it was reported in a few places too. I know Albert Breer talked about it. Greg Bedard, I believe, had it too. And one of the quotes that Breer had that really stuck out to me was essentially it was about McDaniels and how he was essentially turning a pretty complex offense. You know, obviously we Patriots fans, we saw that during his first 19 years with the Patriots, but he was essentially turning a complex offense into what Breer called more user friendly. And I think that term really kind of stuck out to me, and it just, to me, it's a great thing, right? I mean, and I wrote about this last week. I mean, one of the biggest criticisms of McDaniels, you know, during his, previous 2 decades with the team was a lot of his offenses were pretty complex, and so it made it difficult on younger players. And it really came back to, it was even a criticism to why the Patriots couldn't draft and develop receivers, because, you know, essentially McDaniels' systems were just so complex that those players couldn't catch on. Obviously, you know, guys like Tom Brady and, you know, Julian Edelman and those sorts of guys didn't have as much of a problem with it. But, you know, N'Keal Harry, for example, you know, he certainly did. So I just think to hear McDaniels talk about, you know, evolving and all that sort of thing as well, you know, and to hear this Breer comment calling it user friendly, I just think that really sticks out. And I think it really could be a big, you know, a pretty pivotal change for the Patriots if he brings in, you know, new schemes and new terminology, I guess, that's kind of easier to understand for a lot of these young guys, because the Patriots are a young team. I mean, there's, they got two receivers going into their second year. Pop Douglas is going into his third. I mean, they have a lot of young players as well as the offensive linemen. So I just think, you know, hearing that user-friendly term or more user-friendly, I think that's a great thing.
Well, Josh McDaniels actually talked about, as you call user-friendly, talked about that as it pertains to young talent before he even got the gig. He was on Games with Names with our old pal Julian Edelman and talking about how you develop young talent, particularly at that quarterback position. And this is fascinating stuff. Again, remember, this was before he got the gig. Listen to how he's describing how you develop a young quarterback.
I think you have to have a plan, you know, and that obviously starts from the head coach, his perspective, and you have to, you know, be able to agree on how you're going to kind of unveil that thing to the player, and, you know, and ultimately bring him along. You know, you were a young player that needed to make progress every step of the way.
Yeah.
And this is no different. It's just there's so much notoriety and so much attention on the quarterback position. So if they're not talking about your arm angle, they're talking about your footwork. If they're not talking about that, they're talking about your eyes or your read or how you navigated the pocket. And there's a lot of things that go into playing it well. But I at the end of the day, I think you got to take the player where he's at, you know, when he comes in, whether that was Castle or Garoppolo or Stidham or Brissett or Mack, Aiden O'Connell. Like, you got to take the player where he's at. They're all at different spots. They all have been taught different things. They've all, digested different amounts of information. Some have played in different systems than yours. Some have played in maybe some that were a little bit more like yours. And you just got to figure out, all right, what do they know? And what am I going to try to, you know, push forward to get him to progress the quickest, you know? I think I can get this and this done in OTAs. Okay, great. Cadence, play calls, footwork. All right, good. than in training camp. Now I got to get him to see different coverages and understand defenses a little bit more
And protection.
protections, and then, move forward, ball security. And then the red zone's a different animal, and third down and 2-minute offense. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think it's just having a really good feel for where's the player at.
Yeah.
Can't just keep throwing stuff at him. I always talk about it. They have a bucket. You guys all had a bucket, and yours was a big bucket at the end. Like, you could handle whatever we gave you. Well, when you take a young quarterback, it's more like a cup. You got to put some stuff in his cup, and when it gets to the top, you got to stop. You know what I mean? And then make sure that he, has this and he can do it well. And then, okay, so then when he's ready for more, then you get him a bigger cup.
Yeah.
And then hopefully he ends up with a bucket, and you got a bunch of stuff in there that you can do well. But there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to it. And I think knowing where the player's at is really important.
Esmeezy, this is great news because Drake May is such a worker bee. He's obsessed with the game. Certainly not comparing him to Brady, but we see what hard work does at that quarterback position. Brady had that work ethic. I believe Drake May has an insane work ethic as well. And I watched him as the season went on with a lack of talent, with just the most vanilla play calling you could ever see. He still got better every week. Still. I mean, that I never gave credit to the coaches for that. I gave credit to Drake May, and I think the coaches didn't blow it with that. So that tells me, with hearing McDaniels talk about this, not even knowing he was going to be working with the Drake May, but just him talking about developing a young quarterback and how they have cups of knowledge, not buckets. You want to turn it into a bucket eventually. Hell, I think Drake May's ready for a bucket. Now, he's got work to do, but will he be attached to the hip to Josh McDaniels the same way Tom Brady was? I believe that answer is yes, S. Mizzle. So I am extremely optimistic that Drake May, from rookie year with absolute morons as coaches to year 2 being well coached in his work ethic and his abilities and God-given gifts, I think he's going to take a monstrous leap.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I just, the way that McDaniels just laid it out on that podcast, I think is just such a good way of looking at it, right? Like, you're not putting everyone into one category. So, a guy who's been in the league for 10 years isn't getting, all the same sort of stuff put on his plate as a guy who's been in the league for 2. I think that's really good. And, that's how the Patriots, and that's how the Patriots coaches should be operating. So I would agree. I think, if we want to stick to buckets and cups comparisons, I would say Drake May at this point is probably going to go into year 2 and he'll have a pitcher, right? It's, what's that, 5 cups, I think, when you're talking about beer, I guess, depending on the beer. But I would say it's going to be something like that. And, eventually, whether it's the year after that or, year 3, year 4, I certainly could see Drake May with that sort of bucket, comparison.
Jesus, dude. Now you got me thinking about beer, man. What are we doing here, Esmeezy? What are you trying to do to me, bro?
I think there were Natty Lights pitchers in college that were 5 cups. So.
Hey, we've come a long way from Natty Lights. I'm such a beer snob now. Not that this is the greatest beer ever, but you know what I love? I'm a big Allagash guy. You like Allagash White?
I do like Allagash. Yeah, I'm a big Allagash guy. This isn't the season for Allagash, in my opinion. Now it's like Allagash is like when Blue Moon's hitting its peak. That's when you get some Allagash.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, listen, with this Patriots season, I wasn't drinking much beer. It was hard liquor, brother. When you watch this Patriots team, this is not a beer drinking team. This is, you got to take shots to the face just to deal with it. You got to see double and triple to deal with it. Maybe this upcoming season with Vrabel and McDaniels and all these guys, maybe we can get back to drinking the brewski wooskies. Now, Scott Zolak talked about how McDaniels will shape his offense to fit Drake May. And that kind of goes against, I'm sure you've seen it and heard it on Twitter and other places, where it's sort of this narrative out there where it's like, well, will McDaniel's system work with Drake May? I've even seen some fools have the nerve to be like, is McDaniels too much of an alpha to deal with Mike Vrabel? Come on. First of all, they're tight. this was a Vrabel hire, as we talked about. Secondly, Vrabel is a large human. He could put Josh McDaniels in a locker, close it, and walk away. Okay, there's no alpha off here. It's Vrabel's team. But Scott Zolak believes that McDaniels will shape his offense around Drake May successfully. Let's take a listen.
He's not going to force him. I know this for a fact. He will not force him to run the Brady offense. That was Tom's offense. They took that thing to another level. If Josh feels that Drake is better off, terminology-wise, running a West Coast style offense, Josh will morph to that.
Zoe's right. I mean, listen, Cam Newton, Mac Jones, Matt Castle, obviously Brady. We've seen him work with a multitude of different quarterbacks with a multitude of different skill sets. And to be honest, again, anytime I talk about Drake May and Tom Brady in the same breath, I get the heebie-jeebies because I almost cringe hearing the things that are coming out of my mouth. But stay with me here because I'm not saying he's greater. However, I named Brady, Newton, Mac Jones, and Matt Castle. This Drake May kid has a piece of each one of those dudes. I mean, I think Josh McDaniels can really unleash the potential and the abilities of this kid like nobody's business. I think it's going to work out just fine, brother.
No, I agree. And, like you talked about kind of, what's the kid say? Like, you're in your bag or he's in his bag.
Yep.
I mean, Josh McDaniels has a bag of versatility when it comes to, adapting different offenses. I mean, you talk about the spread team with Welker, with Randy Moss. You talk about the two tight ends with Rob Gronkowski and the other tight end there was. You talk about a hurry up, more of a hurry up team after that. Then you talk about the run heavy team when it was Sony Michel run behind a fullback and, en route to Super Bowl in 2018. So it's just, and, then you talk about, McDaniels when it comes to the Cam Newton stuff and, leveraging Mac Jones. Mac Jones' biggest strength coming out of school was his ability to kind of, process and diagnose defenses, right? And McDaniels was essentially allowed him that, gave him that at the line. So I think when it comes to it, like, there is a lot of versatility when it comes to McDaniels, and I can't help. I agree. I don't think this offense is going to look like, Tom Brady's offense. It's a wildly different quarterback who has a wildly different skill set. So I just think there's so much to it, and I do think McDaniels is maybe the most accomplished at this point. Again, I mentioned this earlier when it came to developing a quarterback. How there was no one better, but there might not be anyone better when it comes to, having a resume of, offensive, adaptiveness and, versatility. And, that was one of the things that really stood out to Mike Vrabel. And, it was when I talked to Mike Vrabel after his introductory press conference, I kind of asked him, what are some of the traits that you're looking for in an offensive play caller? And he said, that adaptability and, having versatility and, with your offensive schemes. And I just think McDaniels makes a ton of sense when it comes to that.